जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवर धारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवर धारी also. I was just thinking, everyone is so much scattered everywhere. If it's possible, you come a little bit closer. It's a little bit easier to focus. So we're reading from Srimad. You can give it actually. I have it here, so you can give it. Give him. Right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So this evening we're reading from Bhagavad Gita. This is chapter 10, text 18. Chapter 10, text 18. So you can repeat after me. Just start with the Sanskrit words, then look at the words. Vishtarena Atmanaha Yogam Vibhutim Cha Janatana Bhuyaha Kathaya Triptihi Shinvataha Nasti Me Amritam Vishtarenatmano yogam Vibhutim cha janardana Bhuyaha kathaya triptihi Shimvato nasti me mritam Vishtarena mano yogam Vibhutim cha janardana Bhuyaha kathaya triptihi Shimvato nasti me mritam Vishtarena mano yogam Vibhutim cha janardana Bhuyaha kathaya triptihi Shimvato nasti me mritam
Vishtarenatmano yoga Vibhutim cha janardana Bhuya kathaya triptirhi Shrivato nasti me amritam
Vishtarenatmano yogam Vibhutim cha janardana Bhuya kathaya triptihi Shrivato nasti me amritam. You want to read? Vishtarenatmano yogam Vibhutim cha janardana Bhuya kathaya triptihi Shrivato nasti me mritam. Vishtarena in detail Atmanaha your yogam mystic power,
Vibhutim,
opulences,
Cha,
also, Janardana, O killer of the atheists, Guyaha, again, Kathaya, describe, Triptihi, satisfaction, He, certainly, Shanvataha, hearing, Nasti, there is not, Me, my, Amritam, nectar. Translation by His Divine Grace. O Janardana, again please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I'm never satiated in hearing about you. For the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. Purport given by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. A similar statement was made to Shrutala Swami by the rishis of Naimisharanya, headed by Shonaka. That statement is, Vayam tu na vikrapyama uttamashloka vikrame yakchim patam rasa jnanam svalu hare hare. One can never be satiated, even though one continuously hears the transcendental pastimes of Shri Krishna, who is glorified by excellent prayers. Those who have entered into a transcendental relationship with Krishna relish at every step the descriptions of the pastimes of the Lord. Srimad Bhagavatam 1.119. Thus, Arjuna is interested in hearing about Krishna, and specifically how he remains as the all-pervading Supreme Lord. Now, as far as Amritam or nectar is concerned, any narration or statement concerning Krishna is just like nectar. And this nectar can be perceived by practical experience. Modern stories, fiction, and histories are different from the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. In that one will be tired of hearing mundane stories, but one never tires of hearing about Krishna. It is for this reason only that the history of the whole universe is replete with references to the pastimes of the incarnations of Godhead. The Puranas are histories of bygone ages that relate the pastimes of the various incarnations of the Lord. In this way, the reading matters remains forever fresh, despite repeated readings. Vishtarina Atmano Yogam Vibhutim Chajanarana Bhuyaha Kataya Chati Shimvasto Nastime Pratam. O Janardana, again please describe in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I'm never satiated in hearing about you. For the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words. O Vagyana Timrandasya Kiranjana Shalakya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Valenama Shri Chittanam Anushtam Stapitam Janavutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Spapadatikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Parakamam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sarajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Prajana Samitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Palan Sahagana Shri Vishakamatamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanata Radha Kanata Nastate Tapta Kanachana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavalu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakavatu Vischa Kripa Sindhu Vyaracha Uditana Bhavani Vaishnadevi Namo Shri Krishna Chaitanya Bhagavan Shri Advaita Radha Shivasati Gaura Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. First of all, I want to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to glorify this beautiful statement made by Arjuna. This is Arjuna's statement. So this verse specifically focuses on how the hearing process is so important. Arjuna is emphasizing that very, very heavily. Initially, he wanted to ask, what are your opulences? Obviously, the opulences have been described from 7th chapter onwards. Krishna's opulences have been fully described. As you all know, Bhagavad Gita has got 18 chapters, nearly 700 verses. In the very first sixth chapter, Krishna is describing about the jiva, the antimatter, the jiva, the eternal nature of the jiva. And also Krishna in detail explains the different kind of types of yoga systems to be able to achieve it. Depending on the individual, there are different kind of yoga processes. Eventually they culminate, leading one towards Krishna. But towards the end, especially after the 7th chapter, Krishna's emphasis is heavily towards bhakti, loving devotion, without which he cannot be understood. Yeah? So here, in the 10th chapter, Arjuna is specifically asking the mystic power of your opulences. He heard about the opulences. Krishna has got so much opulences, but about the mystical nature of his opulences, he wanted to know more. In other words, Prabhupada is explaining here in the purport, how is it that you're one? You're standing in front of me, but yet you are pervading throughout the entire universe. Isn't that amazing? There is no nook, there is no corner in any part of the universe, both in the material and the spiritual world, where Krishna does not exist. We can understand that very easily. In Brahma Samhita, what does Lord Brahma say? Lord Brahma is saying, even in every atom, right? In every single atom, Krishna exists. Not just in the heart of the living entity. Some people think that I've got this body, God lives in my heart, and that's it. But that's not it, according to Brahma Samhita. He is actually entering every single cell as Krishna. And beyond the cell, actually a cell is supposed to contain millions of atoms. Although the cell is so invisible, the cell itself contains millions of atoms. And every single atom, Krishna exists. So, in other words, you see this form. Can you imagine how much trillions and trillions of atoms are accumulated in this form? Krishna is present in every single one of them. So, Arjuna wanted to know, tell me about your mysticism, about your opulences. Specifically, you're standing in front of me. How am I meant to understand that you are at the same time pervading throughout the universe? And Krishna is explaining to him in detail how he is actually pervading in the form of his universal form. In other words, the whole material world is nothing but Krishna. It's his separated energy, that's actually him. It's Krishna. And he exists everywhere. So this is mystical, very, very mystical for him. Just like I can be conscious of my physical body, right? I'm not conscious of the body of any one of you. If you feel pain, I don't feel pain. But Krishna is actually conscious of the consciousness of every single living entity throughout the universe. He knows what they are thinking, he knows what they are doing, he knows what they're planning to do. He knows what I'm planning to do 100 years from now. If I do exist, I'm not yogi, but he knows. So Krishna is mystical in that sense. So Arjuna was very keen to know. In fact, in the beginning of the chapter, the 7th chapter, Arjuna is saying, Krishna is saying, now here also not with Arjuna. How by practicing yoga and full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you could know me in full, free from doubt. When your consciousness is attached to me, when you serve me, when your mind is absorbed in me, eventually you will be able to know me in full, know my nature, know how easily I'm pervading. Just like for a devotee, it's not very difficult to understand Krishna pervades throughout the universe. Is it difficult for us? Not difficult. So he's saying, how? By practicing yoga, we practice bhakti yoga, in full consciousness of me. We're trying to be conscious of him at all times. Our mind, we're trying to get our mind to be attached to him. And Krishna is saying, you can know me in full, free from doubt, without any doubt. A devotee has no doubt that Krishna does exist, does pervade throughout the entire universe. And that's what Krishna is confirming there. So the second part of the verse, Arjuna is saying, I am never satiated in hearing. The more I hear about you, my dear Lord Krishna, the more I want to taste the nectar. So this hearing process Arjuna is describing it as Amrita. Amrita means nectar. The nectar is very delicious, very sweet, and very tasty, right? If somebody gives you a nectar in a small little cup, if you drink it, you want more and more and more, right? Because it's so tasty. So hearing about Lord Krishna is like that Amrita, like that nectar. You know, Krishna is just Arjuna is describing. So the Prabhupada gave us this beautiful verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Sutta Goswami Apnai Mishra, when he was headed by the Shonaka, and when they were discussing, they were also discussing the same point, that hearing about the Lord, the glories of the Lord, we can never be satiated. So much so that they can be sitting and listening for days and days and days. Parikshit Maharaj is one good example, right? It's not only Parikshit, but all the sages that were assembled listening to Shukdev Goswami, when they were sitting for 7 days, can you imagine there was no eating, there was no drinking, there was no sleeping. 7 days. Even that 7 days was interrupted because Parikshit was meant to die within 7 days. Otherwise, they would have loved to continue hearing about the glories of the Lord. Obviously, we can't imitate that because these are great sages, great personalities. If we can sit for 1 hour with full attention listening to Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, we're good guys in Kali Yuga. It's very difficult to control the mind and listen. But in general, for a devotee, it's very difficult to be satisfied in listening to Krishna's glories. The devotee always wants to hear more and more. And that's why Prabhupada quoted this verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, Vayum tuna vitartyama uttama shloka vikrame yak shrintam rasadhyana svadu svadu pade pade. He is saying one can never be satiated even though one continuously hears the transcendental pastimes of Sri Krishna, who is glorified by excellent prayers. Those who have entered into a transcendental relationship with Krishna relish at every step the descriptions of the pastimes of the Lord. So the devotee relishes those pastimes in every single step. This is what Bhagavatam is telling us. So, just to talk about the 9 processes of bhakti, the very first one is Shravanam, right? Shravanam is hearing. So, Prahlad Maharaj is giving the importance about the hearing. How can we understand Krishna? How can we develop our love for Krishna if we don't know anything about him? If you want to make a friend, if you don't know anything about that friend of yours who just been introduced to you, if you know nothing about him, how is it possible to have that intimacy, love and closeness? We get close to individuals, we strengthen our relationship with others when we know more and more about them. When we know about what they do, what kind of mentality they have, what kind of characters they have, and what they look like. When we know more and more and more about them, then our attachment increases. Same principle with Shravana, with hearing about the Lord. The more we know about Krishna, the more our attachment increases. Yeah? Normally that's how it works. So this attachment, this love for Krishna by hearing is only perceived by devotees, because devotees are listening or hearing about the glories of Krishna with love and submission. Whereas other people could be philosophers. Yeah? The philosophers have their own agenda. They want to be known as great philosophers, therefore they hear about Krishna so that they can talk about Krishna, I know about Krishna. Yeah? But those kind of people, they may not really have that nectar that the devotees are experiencing, because they have their own agenda, they have their own material agenda. Because of that, they may not experience that joy the devotees are experiencing when they listen about Krishna. So one should hear about Krishna without any ulterior motives. What are those ulterior motives? For instance, entertainment. Sometimes people like to be entertained. Just like some people may have attend the Bhagavad Gita. Like in India, for instance, the Bhagavad Gita is very common. They do it for about 7 days or so. They may attend that just to be able to mix with the social or whatever. I mean, the idea should not be that, well, this is another opportunity for me to mingle with others, let me go and listen to a little bit of the katha, a little bit of the story or whatever. this becomes an entertainment rather than actually keen interest to really understand Krishna, to know Krishna, to hear about Krishna, and to develop our love for Him, to develop our bhakti. So one has to be careful with that. The sincere approach has to be there, when we listen about Krishna. The other one is that people may want to hear and learn so that they can talk about it to be popular. Again, that's a material motivation. Are we doing it for popularity, or are we actually doing it to learn about Krishna and to give to others so that others can benefit from Krishna consciousness and advance in their spiritual life? So we have to question our motive. Why are we hearing? Otherwise the hearing may not be effective. And sometimes people may hear about Krishna. Sometimes some individuals have a tendency. They may have their own point. They want to prove that. They selectively take out some statements like Prabhupada's speeches or from the purport or whatever to substantiate what they're trying to convince others. It may be materially motivated kind of point that they may have. So we have to be very careful. We shouldn't be using some of the points that are described in our books, in the purports, the Prabhupada lectures or whatever, to influence others so that they are on our side. Yeah? This becomes, again, material. So that kind of hearing, we have to be very careful. But in general, in Bhagavad Gita, there are so many wonderful verses that are given by Lord Krishna. What that hearing, how that hearing can help the soul, can help the individual. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita 119, there is a description by Krishna how when the conch were blown during Kurukshetra, the devotees who were hearing the sound of the conch were fearless. Yeah? So sometimes the hearing process about Krishna can make a devotee fearless, abhaya. Yeah? The fear disappears because the darkness, the ignorance is disappearing just by listening to Krishna Katha. Yeah? So that is one area where we can get benefited from. Shri Lord, Rukmini Lord, Shri Ram Shri Lord in time. The other area is again in Bhagavad Gita, where we hear about the Lord more and more, we may lament, there may be some kind of lamentation, even that lamentation can disappear. That's why Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, text 11, Krishna is saying, a wise person will lament neither for the living nor for the dead. Because a wise person has been hearing, has been understanding the messages of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Because of that he is dhira, he is sober, he is undisturbed. Therefore Krishna in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 he is saying, a wise person will not lament neither for the living nor for the dead. That means that jnana, the knowledge that we heard from the Guru, from the spiritual master, will free us from any kind of lamentation. That's the power of hearing, that's the power of Shravana. The other area again in the second chapter, Krishna is describing that we can be also, just simply by hearing about Krishna, we will be very tolerant and we will be undisturbed, we will be sober. And in the same chapter again, Bhagavad Gita is actually quite rich in telling us the kind of benefits we get by hearing about Krishna. In 241, Krishna is saying, by hearing about me, you can be resolute to purpose. Because in the material life, we're not ekkaha purnandana, our mind is not resolute. Yeah? But for a devotee's aim is to develop love for Krishna, therefore his mind is resolute. It's not disturbed. Yeah? Otherwise, materialistic people every day, oh, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that, maybe next year I'll do that. They don't have a fixed mind. Whereas a devotee is very resolute, his path is very clear, because he's marching on towards taking shelter of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So Bhagavad Gita 241, Krishna is saying, those who are in devotion, their path is resolute. That's another benefit of hearing. The other benefit of hearing is we become peaceful. When we are free from ignorance, the ignorance of the material world, we become very peaceful. We know we have a shelter. Who is our shelter? Shri Krishna. So that makes us extremely peaceful. The other benefit Shri Krishna is mentioning in the 4th chapter, text 10, is that if you take refuge of me, your love for me is guaranteed. He is guaranteeing that you can attain love for me simply by hearing and understanding and practicing about my glories. So this Shravanam is so powerful. This hearing, understanding about Krishna is very, very powerful. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 4:36, he's mentioning we can cross over the miseries of the material world simply by lending our ears to hear from the spiritual master, to hear about the glories of Krishna. That will allow us to be able to cross over the miseries of the material world. Again, that's the power of listening, hearing, Shravana. And in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6 verse 3, Krishna is mentioning that you can also easily renounce any kind of attraction you have to gratify your senses. Because in the material world, we're always trying to gratify our senses. Yeah? But simply by hearing about Krishna, then our senses are actually utilized in gratifying Krishna rather than ourselves. So in other words, the senses get purified. When we follow the regulative principles, when we follow the devotional principles, automatically the senses become purified. So the tendency to materially enjoy sense of gratification will disappear. That's coming again from hearing. By hearing and by understanding. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 6:35, Krishna is mentioning the restless mind can be controlled as well. Arjuna mentioned to Krishna, right? How can I control my mind? It's easy to control the wind than controlling my mind. In other words, he's emphasizing the fact that controlling the mind is very difficult. But Krishna has given him the path, how to control the mind. Simply by dovetailing his activities in a devotional way, in a loving way for Krishna, that mind can be controlled. A devotee could have been, attracted to so many kind of material attractions in the world, but he's restraining himself. Not forcefully, but lovingly. Why? Because he's heard so much about the glories of Krishna. Therefore, it becomes easy to control the mind. And eventually in chapter 6, Krishna is saying, ye can intimately unite with me simply by hearing my voice. By understanding who I am, ye can be intimate with me, Krishna is saying in chapter 6. I mean, it goes on with so many wonderful points the Bhagavad Gita is giving us. We can be the instrument for him. He's saying in chapter 11, Arjuna was instructed by Krishna to be just an instrument for him. Because he's heard so much. He heard so much about Bhagavad Gita. Although he was disturbed in the beginning, he could not fight because he felt, why should I kill my kinsmen, my friends, my parents, my guru, just to be able to take over a kingdom? I'm not fighting. But then Krishna gave him a lecture. After hearing and hearing and hearing, now you've heard, now you become my instrument. Because all these people, they were already dead anyway. I've killed them already. You're like an instrument. And Arjuna was ready to fight because of Shravana, because of hearing. He's heard so much from Krishna. So this hearing element is very, very important. It's important to give it priority to, Prabhupada always wanted us to read at least for 1 hour a day to be able to educate ourselves in Krishna consciousness. Yeah? So, I probably will ask you 1 or 2 questions. I want you to listen properly. First of all, we want to understand what aspects of Krishna shall we hear about. When we talk about Shravanam, what should we hear? That's one question. The second one is, who should we hear? There are so many people who tell us, right? Who are the people we should listen from when it comes to listening about Krishna? That's the second question. I'll give you the answer. But you're going to have to give me 1 or 2 points towards the end of the discussion. The third one is, whom shall we hear from? Who are the people we should hear from? Can we just hear about Krishna from anyone? The Oxford University lecturer, he said, I know about Bhagavad Gita, I'm going to teach you, are we going to hear from him? So who shall we hear from? Bhagavad Gita or the glories of Krishna from? And the fifth one is, how should we hear? When we hear, how should we hear? What kind of attitude should we have to be able to listen effectively? And then the final thing is, what is the result of hearing? Why do I need to hear about Krishna? Why do I need to know about the glories of Krishna? So these questions are very important to emphasize the importance of hearing. So let's go back to the first one. I was asking you what aspects of Sri Krishna shall we hear about? Yeah? So,
Rup, Gur, Leela, etc.
mm-hmm.
Forms, quality, pastimes,
Yes, yes.
and his devotee, all his devotees, anything related with Krishna.
Anything related with Krishna. One example I can give you from what you're saying, that for instance in India, I mentioned this earlier on, the Bhagavad Sapta, suddenly hearing, it's very common. It comes in the name of Bhagavad Sapta, that people think, okay, they're going to listen about Bhagavatam. But most of this Bhagavad Sapta, if you analyze it, first of all, it's not the entire Bhagavatam. I mean, there's no way any human being in this day and age can cover the entire Srimad Bhagavatam effectively, like the way Shukadeva Goswami has done it in 7 days. That's impossible. If you analyze most of the Bhagavad Saptas, they select few verses. In fact, they skip heavily the 9 cantos. Shukadeva Goswami put so much effort to establish the first, second, third canto until the 9th canto, so that the foundation is laid before we dive into Ras Leela and all this exoteric pastimes of the Lord in the 10th canto. The idea why Shukadeva Goswami has done it that way is that first of all we have to understand the magnanimity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The first 9 cantos are very important in describing about the different incarnations, different avatars, how Krishna is expanding for our benefit. Yada yada dharmasya. He comes in so many different forms. So by the time someone has read all those 9 cantos, you've got clear idea, clear foundation about who Krishna is. And by the time you dive into the 10th canto, you can relate to it. But most of this Bhagavad Saptas, because they cannot cover the entire 12 canto in 7 days, like the way Shukadeva Goswami has done, they select verses, mostly, even the 10th canto, they select specific verses. Mostly they dive into Ras Leela, the Krishna's relationship with gopis, and then the people end up taking a wrong kind of understanding about the identity of Krishna. A boy who's running around with girls, with gopis and all that, they don't have a good understanding about the magnanimity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, those kind of approach, for instance, although it is talking about Krishna, it can be dangerous. Yeah? These things, the spiritual master has to guide us in such a way, especially someone who is at the preliminary stage, the basics, the foundations of Krishna consciousness should be taught. If you dive into directly, the pastimes and the conjugal relationship Krishna has with the gopis and all that, people will be lost, for sure. Especially in the material world, we don't have the capacity. So sometimes we should take the guidance of the authentic spiritual master on how, on what to read, what to hear, what to listen. Yeah? It's like here in our Krishna conscious society, we emphasize especially the reading of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita lays a very good foundation. Yeah? Very, very good foundation. Bhagavatam is a little bit more advanced. And if it is read, it should be read like the way Shukadeva Goswami taught. You start from the first canto. And Srila Prabhupada has given us wonderful purports to explain very clearly before we dive into very advanced kind of forms of pastimes of Krishna, especially the conjugal kind of relationship Krishna has in the 10th canto. It's important to actually go through the cantos step by step, alongside the purport. Yeah? And who should we hear it from? Who should hear? Who are the kind of people who should hear the stories of Krishna? Just like about the offense of the holy name, one of the offenses of the holy name is that we should be careful not to tell about the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to non-devotees, to someone who's envious. Yeah? You wanted to ask a question? Okay, yeah, tell me the answer.
We should hear from the pure devotee of the Krishna who should connected with the mystic substance.
That's a good one. That's the other question. This one is, who is the person who should be hearing about Krishna? That's the question. What kind of people? Just like if someone is really, really envious of Krishna,
Inquisitive,
yeah, We should be like that. But someone who's very envious about Krishna, you have to be careful before telling him the glories of Krishna. You have to know what's acceptable for him to bring him out from that envious nature. That's why one of the offenses of the holy name is we do not tell about the glories of the holy name for someone who is very offensive, because that will just aggravate them more, they become more offensive. Yeah? So in other words, the person who is hearing should be also qualified. What is the qualification? Submissiveness. You have to be submissive, you have to do service, you have to be loving. When you're loving, when you hear about Krishna, it's effective. When we are envious, that hearing of Krishna actually makes us more envious. We become like Shishupal. It doesn't matter how much they tell Shishupal about the glories of Krishna, he gets more aggravated, more aggravated. No, I hate Krishna. He was like that. So the third question is, who shall we hear from? That's what you replied, which is nice. Who should we hear about the glories of Krishna from? First of all, the person who is teaching us about Krishna should follow Krishna's instruction, should be an acharya. Sometimes teaching and practicing is different. You have a teacher who teaches the student, do not smoke. Smoking is not good for you. And then during the break, he goes out the back of the room and he smokes cigarette himself. The students see that. Do you think they will follow his instructions? They won't follow his instruction. Why? Because he's not exemplary. He's not an acharya. He's not teaching by example. He has to teach by example. So the first person that we should hear from is, he knows about Krishna Upadesh, but he practices it. If he's practicing it, then it's worth hearing. Yeah? He's a genuine person. The second one is he has to be bona fide. He has to come from the recognized disciplic succession. Now we have the Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya like that, we have Vaishnava Sampradayas. So if they are coming from a recognized Vaishnava Sampradaya, if they are authentic, gurus, appointed by recognized sadhus, then we can hear from them as well. Otherwise, if he is a self-appointed guru, nowadays you get so many self-appointed gurus, and they manufacture their own ideas about Krishna. Yeah? So what happens is if we hear from them, we're actually contaminating ourselves by a wrong philosophy, wrong teachings or whatever. So that person, the guru, has to be recognized, and the person should take shelter of Krishna. Someone who is devoted to Krishna, someone who's taking shelter of Krishna. That's the kind of qualification we expect from them. Their life has to be dedicated and serving Krishna, and they are also completely dependent on Krishna. Those are the kind of qualities, we expect from them. How should we hear? When we hear it, okay, we are qualified, we are submissive, we're sincere, we're devoted to Krishna, but when we're listening, how should we hear? Shravanam. Yeah? First of all, it should be in the association of devotees as much as possible. It's alright to listen, lectures and everything, but every now and then it's good to associate with devotees so that if I have any queries, if I have any misunderstanding, I can immediately rectify it. So as much as possible to hear and to listen, to discuss like this, and the association of devotees becomes very effective. The second quality that we should have when we hear is that we should hear with rapt attention. Like what you're doing now. I can see all of you. Everyone is listening about attention. This is what Shri Krishna wants, to pay attention. Yeah? Actually, your mind is pure because you've been associating with devotees, you've been chanting Hare Krishna, you've been serving, the devotees of the Lord here in the temple. Because of that, your mind is purified. Because your mind is purified, you can listen with rapt attention. That's what Srila Prabhupada is saying in his purports, that we can only listen about Krishna with rapt attention when our mind is pure. If our mind is contaminated, we become restless. When is the class finishing? I want to go out. We become very restless. So that listening should be done with rapt attention. Another point is humility. We should listen with submissiveness and humility. Krishna mentioned that. Tatvidi pranipatena. One should have a humble state of mind to be able to listen. If we have some kind of arrogance, we won't be able to absorb what we heard about the glories of Krishna. The other one is we should be sincere. Sincere means eager to understand. If we don't understand, we can ask questions. That's sincerity. To be able to go further and further, to be able to understand very clearly about what we heard about Krishna. The other one is seriousness. Seriousness, taking things to heart. When we hear about Krishna, there may be some instruction given to us that we haven't practiced. Actually, when we're hearing, I can see someone chanting. When you're hearing, especially Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, you put your beads aside. You don't chant. It becomes offensive. You don't chant and hear at the same time. Yeah? When we're hearing, you put your beads, your mala aside. No chanting during hearing. Yeah? When Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken, some of us have a tendency to chant. We don't do that. Curiosity is associated with asking questions. We have to be curious. If you don't understand, don't let it go. Prabhu, I don't understand this. Please help me to understand further. So devotee's quality should be always curious to know more about the glories of Krishna. The other one is eagerness. We have to be eager. Eager. Every day, eager to listen. Every day, let me go lecture on. Let me read. You know, that's eagerness. You know, that eagerness complements the reading process nicely. The other one is patience. You know, we may not understand things, but in due course, through the association of devotees, we'll be able to understand what we heard. So we should be patient until because there is an answer for everything. The Vedic literatures are so rich, there's nothing that can be left unexplained. So that patience is required. Gratitude, that's another good point. Gratitude means to be grateful for someone who's giving you instruction, someone who's revealing about the glories of the Lord to you. You should be grateful. The more you're grateful to that person, the more Krishna will allow you to understand what you've heard. Yeah? So gratitude is a very important quality of a Vaishnava. Persistence, you know, we should always persist to know more and more. So these are some of the things that I wanted to share. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a description that says, to gain affinity for hearing the message of Krishna, we must serve devotees completely free from vice. Yeah? Free from vice. And that humble attitude, submissive attitude, pure attitude should be there to be able to understand. I think the last point I wanted to mention is about the result of hearing about Krishna. What do we get out of it? We're hearing about Krishna. What do we gain out of it? What is the advantage? First of all, we get inconceivable blessing from Lord Krishna by simply hearing. When we hear about the glories of the Lord, unbelievable amount of blessings is showered upon us from Lord Krishna. When we hear, we will realize more and more how magnanimous Sri Krishna is. His magnanimous nature is revealed to us simply by lending our ear by listening about Krishna. And then when we hear, when we listen, we'll be able to see everything in relation to Krishna. You see an insect, you know, oh, there's a Paramatma, there's a super soul. You see a bird flying, you can see how beautiful Krishna's creation is. Yeah? A devotee is like that. Whenever we go, we see everything in relation to Krishna. That's because we've heard so much about the glories of Krishna. Because Krishna is everywhere. And then we see the material world as beautiful. Normally we talk about the material world as dirty place, horrible place, or whatever. But actually the material world is not dirty and horrible. The material world is beautiful because it's Krishna's creation. We spoiled it. We humans spoiled it. Because of that it appears to be dirty. But otherwise Krishna's creation is not horrible and dirty. He made it actually beautiful and conducive for us to advance the Krishna consciousness. But because we built a materialistic society, because of that the world is spoiled, ugly the way it looks now. In Satyuga it wasn't like that. In Satyuga this planet was as good as heaven. Because everything was so beautiful, because everyone is connected to Krishna. Krishna was the center of the whole society. When we also hear about Krishna more and more, we become animated. I'm a retired man. I retired about a year and a half ago. I'm a voluntary retired person. Otherwise, I've been working in corporate organizations for the last many years, 30 years maybe. But a lot of people think, oh, you're young, you can work for 10 years. Why are you retiring? You know, what are you going to do? You're going to get bored. But they have no idea about our lifestyle as devotees. I used to work 5 days a week, but now I work for Krishna 7 days a week. Non-stop. We don't have weekends as devotees. Every day is service, every day is service. So what happened? Because I've heard so much about Krishna, I become animated, energetic. Every minute is used in the service of Krishna. Yeah? We become joyous. We become very happy. Everything is vivid. We're very clear. We don't get confused. We are heading in one direction. By serving the spiritual master to attain the lotus feet of Krishna, life is very clear and vivid for us as devotees. Yeah? This is all coming because of Shravana, because of hearing. And then we become deliberate. You know, our deliberation is always strong towards achieving the lotus feet of Krishna. And then we also get inspired by hearing. When you hear, you get inspired to share what you heard. Sometimes it's very difficult to keep what we heard about Krishna consciousness because our nature is to give it to other people. So that hearing will create the urge for you to be able to give it to others as well. And that makes you, in return, dear to Krishna. As Krishna is saying, when you give something to others, you become very dear to me. Krishna is saying, there is no more dear person to me than the person who is giving my message to other people. Yeah? So that way we become very, very dear to Krishna. So those are the things I wanted to share. This hearing process, reading and hearing are almost the same thing. When you're reading, you're actually hearing about the glories of the Lord. Yeah? So as much as possible, when you're cooking, when you're cleaning, when you're serving, it's always good to put a lecture on. Even if you're driving, you put something in your car to listen to lecture. Every day we should be able to hear. But nothing less than an hour. Every day we should be able to either read or hear about the glories of Krishna. When we do that, we will obtain all these benefits that we discussed about. Yeah? So I think I want to stop here at this stage. I want to take 1 or 2 questions. So if anyone has any additional points to add, that would be nice. If you can add. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji.
So you know, in the 18th chapter, text number 67, Krishna says that this confidential knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere or devoted or engaged in devotional service, nor to one who is envious of me. But still we see that the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita is being preached to everyone. So, but here Krishna is telling us not to do that to people who are not austere. So why does that happen?
Yes, in general we do that. Specifically, I think if everyone has a question, Krishna is saying that, you know, Rajavidya, this knowledge, the king of knowledge is very confidential. But he's telling Arjuna, I'm telling you because you're a good friend. You're kind, you're submissive. Therefore, I'm going to reveal everything for you, my dear Arjuna. Otherwise, it remains to be confidential. So Krishna is saying it remains confidential because unless we have a devotional attitude, it's very difficult for materialistic people to understand what's being said. Just like telling them Paramatma is within our heart. Unless you're a devotee, it's very difficult for people to accept it. It becomes a secret for them. It becomes a confidential knowledge for them. Yeah? But normally, in general, when we preach for the general mass. You know, we give lectures and everything. But if we know there are individuals who are very envious towards Krishna, then we should be cautious, because we're not doing them a favor. It's like putting fuel to the fire. There is a fire. If you want to put the fire out, you put water. You don't put fuel. If you put fuel, then the fire gets bigger and bigger. That's exactly what will happen with envious people. People who are very, very envious. You see that even, I don't want to mention it, but from a different kind of religious background, some of the people, whose devotees, they really have fights. Born again Christians, some of them are very extreme. When the devotees are distributing books, they converse with them to provoke them. They ask questions, thinking that. And then when the devotees start revealing things, they become more and more angry because they have one thing in mind. They want to convince him rather than be convinced. They don't want to listen because they don't have that submissive attitude to be able to listen. So with this kind of people, we refrain. But there's no harm addressing the general public unless it's those individuals who are really antagonistic and very envious of those who are engaged. Because the general public is innocent to a lot of extent. They are innocent. But some of them can be quite aggressive. Yeah. So with those kind of people, we don't want to fan, because they become more and more offensive. So it's a good point though. But it remains confidential because unless you take up devotional service and unless you hear properly about Krishna from the Guru, these things people cannot relate to it. Yeah, they can't understand the message of Bhagavad Gita like the way the devotees understand. The devotees can understand it very well. For very good background information. Yeah. No, carry on.
Krishna says this, and not even a few verses later, Sanjay has already revealed this information to Dhritarashtra, and we know that Dhritarashtra is not devotionally inclined or stuff like that. So here Krishna says that to his devotee, and at the same time, Sanjay is also a devotee of after hearing this. And then he reveals this to Dhritarashtra, he's not a devotee. So isn't Sanjay already directly contradicting Krishna's instruction here?
It is the purport Prabhupada saying, devotee take this risk and he takes this offense. Because devotees are more compassionate than even Krishna. So that restriction they break. And he takes the risk. That's why all the great devotees were attacked by the non-envious people, but this risk they take.
Otherwise, disseminating message of Krishna will become very difficult for the general mass. You've got to try. But when you know that people are coming aggressively against what we're preaching, we have to take it as an force.
Also devotees are intelligent.
Yeah.
Devotees are intelligent, they know how we can use it.
Just like one of the Mohammedan leaders in India, he was trying to put down the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, whatever. There was one popular person who was like a saintly person who was challenged. He knew he's not going to convince him. He knew this man is just there to attack. So he kind of diffused the situation. But in general, the public would say, oh, why didn't he fight with him? Why didn't he attack him? But the thing is, even if you try to, you can't convince them that they're set in their ways. If the person is submissive, if you explain to them, then you will absorb. You will be able to take it. So like Prabhu was saying, the devotee has to be expert on how to maneuver his preaching technique, depending who would be preaching to. But I agree with you, initially, for a general mass, unless we take that risk, I think our preaching will be harmful. But when we see that it's obvious that there are certain individuals that are totally against, either we can segregate them and handle them separately, otherwise it's best not to reveal. That's why the offense of the holy name is clearly mentioned, right? Do not preach about the glories of the holy name to those kind of English people. But a very interesting question. It came from a different angle. Makes us think.
Sometimes scripture saying somebody hears jokingly, mockingly for the entertainment, the holy name of the Lord, they will be purified. At the same time it mentioned that we should not listen holy name or Krishna Katha from the non-devotees because it become poison, like nectar become poison. So sometimes this looks like contradiction.
May look like contradiction, but I think that message is specifically for devotees who know how we should be hearing. If I'm practicing devotional service, I should be hearing to make myself popular so that I learn something so that I can impress others. That's the kind of message that was described earlier on. But in general, you have to celebrate unknown devotional service. Even when we do Harinam, people just make a mockery of the devotees. devotees, that's still welcome. Just by dancing, even though they're doing a little bit of service in the name of mockery, they actually make some kind of advancement, in general. Let's call that Yatasika. They don't know what they're doing, but they connect with the devotee. At least they're smiling, they're positive, they're dancing with them. So Krishna actually gives yesterday's lecture was all about that. It's just a little service. Swalpam Abhyasa Dharmasya. A little advancement in the path of devotional service can save one from the greatest type of fear. So, sometimes when people approach devotional service in that manner, at the neophyte stage, they can still make advancement. But when we are practicing devotional service, we must not hear with some kind of material calculation, let me entertain myself today, listening a little bit of this, we should be serious, we should be absorbed. As devotees, we're expected to be fully absorbed to listen. We shouldn't take advantage of the hearing to benefit ourselves in the future so that we have that so-called knowledge opulence. Oh, he is knowledgeable. I can be glorified. People will be, you know so much. Yeah? That becomes a material calculation. Thank you for that.
But devotees should be a compassion on those people, like Bhagavad Katha. They are doing for maybe entertainment. So, but still they are going to be purified. So, devotee has to see in that angle, at least these people are non-devotee, they are doing the entertainment, but still listening the holy name of the Lord.
I think we were mixing the neophyte group from the devotee group.
Yes.
The discussion we have is message for devotees who are practicing devotional life. But the neophyte people, Kanishtas and neophyte, those people who are coming for the first time, they actually get benefit. There's no harm in attending those Bhagavad Sattas. At least they know the Srimad Bhagavatam is glorious or whatever. But for someone who's seriously practicing devotional life, going out of their way from this kind of setup to that kind of setup, that's not recommended. That's the point we're trying to make. But otherwise, any connection that we have with Bhagavatam, with Bhagavad Gita, as devotees, even in a funny way, like you mentioned during Harinam, some of them are drunk. And when we do Harinam repeatedly straight to London, we pass by pubs. They actually bring their beer with them right in the middle of the devotees while they were drinking. They just Hari. They're drinking alcohol. So they get some benefit. Okay, they may be drunk, they may be materialistic, whatever, but they did something. Some little service that they do, they actually get purified for it. So anyone who's connected with devotees, somehow, anyone who's connected with Bhagavatam, with Bhagavad Gita, with temple, with anything related to devotion, they make some advancement. But most of the lecture that we did today is for us, for devotees, how we should control ourselves so that we can hear properly from the proper source with proper attitude. I think most of the lecture was based on that specifically for us as devotees. But otherwise, for the general mass, any connection to the devotional practices will lend some benefit. So that's a good point. Any other points? Questions? Thank you for listening so nicely. Really appreciate it. So I hope we can take advantage of that and we can hear more and more and read more and more. That's the whole purpose of the whole discussion today. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaura Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
I am